Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Independent View with your host, Lobo Tigre of IndependentSpeculator.com. Our guest of the day is Daniel Jimenez. He's the founding partner of iLiMarkets. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. You can let me know.
That's okay. That's okay.
Excellent. Okay. Well, why are we talking to Daniel? He's a longtime lithium industry veteran, worked at SQM for 28 years, one of the world's top producers. So he probably has forgotten more about lithium than I'll ever know. And lithium is very exciting to everybody today. So before we get into the markets today, Daniel, if you would tell us a little bit about your background, what did you do at SQM? You know, presumably you weren't pushing a broom, and that makes you qualified to comment on the market today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lobo. Thank you for having me here. Yes, I mean, I've been in the lithium world since the late 90s. I started to work at SQM in the early 90s when the decision was made to step into lithium, and it was almost an accidental entry. So yeah, and then I was privileged to participate in all the introduction of lithium, especially in Europe and in Asia. Then I based out of Europe at that time. Then I held, and over two periods, the position of Senior VP Commercial Global. So I had global responsibility over lithium sales for 10 years in two periods. And in between, I also had responsibility over the exploration group. So there we were exploring not only lithium, but also metals like copper, gold, iron at that time as well. So was my life at SQM. And I left SQM in 2019 and started up iLiMarkets, which is this consulting firm where we focus essentially on two metals, lithium and iron, which is what I know, what I've worked for the last 25 years, more or less.
Very good. Well, so I've got so much that I could go from there, but just real quick. I remember driving around the Atacama and being told that lithium was, as you say, it's an accident. Originally, the idea was potassium. Is that right? And then I heard that there were even times where there was so much lithium in your potassium brine that they were pumping it back into the ground. Is that true?
It is. Yeah, it is correct. First of all, SQM stepped into the Atacama because it was looking for potash, which is needed for the production of potassium nitrate. And together with this brine, there was lithium, which, and I was still a very small soldier at that time, but originally the company didn't know if what it was good for and if it should pursue that business. Finally decided to pursue it, and it became clear that Atacama was such a incredible resource that it basically changed the lithium world in 2 years. By introducing a new price level, most of the production around the world had to shut down, and the only thing which remained really open was Australia's Greenbushes mine, and partially also some of the Zimbabwean production, but all the rest was shut down. North America, Russia, China, everything. So that was Atacama meant to the world at that time.
Well, that's very interesting. And I guess in particular, you know, as a person who loves kicking the rocks, I'm interested in your technical background. But what you said about your experience in sales strikes me as most relevant for the conversation today, because you would have your contacts in the industry all around the world, and I assume you maintain those. So if anybody has their finger on the pulse of who's buying, who's selling at what price, it would be you, I presume.
I mean, I've been now out of the day-to-day transactions for almost 4 years, so I will not claim that I would know what everybody's doing. But yeah, I know many people in the industry, and that, of course, you hear indirectly things which probably otherwise you wouldn't know about that.
I appreciate the humility there. All right, yeah, I wasn't looking for that, but that's a good discovery. So I have many questions, but the big one to start with is, of course, the balance of the market. And there are many different studies out there, and most of them seem to show, some take one side, some take the other. There are a few outliers, but most seem to show that for the next few years, at least maybe 27, 28 or so, maybe 29, the market's in a tight balance. And then depending on what your assumptions are, whether that's a surplus or a deficit. Is that your view as well, or do you differ with that?
No, I'm looking at the big picture 2020 to 2030. Demand is going to grow from 300,000 tons to 3 million times 10. And that's a crazy growth rate. And yeah, there are a number of projects around there which claim they're going to produce a lot of lithium. And that eventually, and there are even some investment banks which are saying there's going to be a surplus. And it's true, there's a lot of money being put into this industry today. But what is evident is that the technical know-how to develop resources, to concentrate lithium and to produce lithium chemicals is very scarce. And simply because the industry was so small 2 years ago that you cannot grow by that size every year without major hiccups, right? And that's why when I look at supply forecast, you have analysts which take by the number what projects are announcing, and that's definitely not going to happen.
Well, that was actually a question I was going, but what you just said is something I hadn't thought of. What you're saying is the key bottleneck is actually the people.
It's people. It's not resources. It's not money. It's people.
I confess I hadn't really thought of it that way. But the way I thought of it is, okay, you have all these projects, and when it goes from PEA to pre-feasibility to full feasibility, it gets worse every step of the way. And even when you have a feasibility study, when you build the mine, that's when you find out whether the study was any good or not. So these models, have you looked at your peers' models, and do you know how many of them assume that just because it's in the feasibility study, that's what we'll see? Or do they discount that? Or how does that look? I mean, this idea that just because there's these known pounds in the ground out there, that they're going to come to the market, I don't know what the assumptions are behind that. Do you?
I mean, what we look at usually is at the studies, and there's one thing which will strike you immediately. Each and every single project claims to be in the first quartile in the cost curve.
Yes.
Yeah. Then you look at the data of the resource, and it's lower grade than the current operators. In general, companies which have never operated lithium, and yet with a lower grade, they get lower cost, higher yields, everything better. That's not going to happen. And that is very consistent across the spectrum of projects you have. And that's why we're so convinced that most of them will not execute as they are being promoted. And then you have another big element, which is permitting.
Mm-hmm.
Permitting is in some places impossible. In other places, it's becoming increasingly difficult. So also you have to, where there are controllable elements in a project development, permitting is definitely out of control. So this optimistic views about that the world is going to be able to produce in average every year an incremental amount, which is equivalent to the total production in 2020, is, I think, a very unrealistic view of what mankind can do in such a short period of time. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, but I think it's very.
I hear you. I think skepticism is a prime virtue for all investors, and especially for speculators in the commodity sector. But let's say if we narrow it down from, forget about greenfields, forget about, even development projects, from wannabes. But if we just look at the known entities, your Albemarle, your SQMs, your producers out there, and their brownfield projects, the ones that they have already got in the works, how long can that keep up with demand?
No, I mean it's limited. It's limited. If you look at Albemarle, which when we look at the portfolio of resources they have, and being optimistic, I think it's unlikely that Albemarle, with the resources they have today, can go to more than 400,000 tons of LCE. Whereas their plans are to go to 600,000 tons from now to 2030. So yeah, I think it's challenging for Albemarle to reach that. In the case of SQM as well, It might grow, especially if it reaches now an agreement with Codelco. It might grow beyond the 240,000 it has. In Atacama, maybe they can go to 350, but and then Australia, Mount Holland as well, but that's it. I mean, it's we're talking about maybe 150,000 tons more than what they have today on publicly announced. But it's very challenging for these companies to keep pace with the growth of demand.
Okay, understood. I want to get into the different jurisdictions, but before that, let's come back to the balance question a little bit. One of the things that we've noticed, and particularly, for copper, the electric car story is something extra. Copper is used in so many things. It doesn't make that much difference. I mean, it makes a difference, but not as much a difference as it does to lithium. The new use case for lithium for the cars is enormous. So as you know, what happens to the auto industry, it impacts the lithium supply and demand balance much more than some of these other big industrial metals. And what we also notice is that car sales tend to go down dramatically during recessions. So I'm not asking you to be a crystal ball about where the economy is going, but just assume that there's going to be a recession, which is my base case. So if I'm right, and we're going into a not soft landing and a significant, if not, let's not be doomsday here, not catastrophic, but we're going into a significant global recession. In past recessions, that's usually taken a couple of years to come out of. Auto sales have tanked and then taken a couple of years to come back. In that case, would that not in over the next couple of years help with the supply-demand balance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there's some catastrophic event and sales of passenger vehicles drop dramatically, that evidently has an impact compared with the base scenario which we have today, which is that vehicle sales will grow. They're still not even close to the global sales we had pre-pandemic sales level. But then you have the other effect, which is the growth of share of electric vehicles, right? And that we have seen last year, for example, where global electric vehicles, passenger vehicles did not grow. Sales of passenger vehicles did not grow, yet sales of electric vehicles grew by 50% last year. So,
but 50% from a small base. Have you done the math? Like, could we see, say, 5% reduction in auto sales, but a 10% increase in EV sales, such that EV sales actually went up, even if the whole market went down?
Yeah.
Have you done that?
That is what has happened, and I think it's very likely to happen, because it is projected that EVs amount to between 45 and 50% of the passenger vehicle sales towards the end of the decade. And when we're starting from a base of last year of 12%, this is a very important, not only relative growth, but also absolute growth in terms of vehicles. So yeah, I think it's very unlikely that we will have anywhere a not growing or even decreasing EV sales year by year. I think just the contrary, that EV sales are going to grow, are going to be that growth is going to be very resilient despite of world economic troubles, and that we will end up towards the end of the decade seeing this very significant share of electric vehicles in the passenger vehicle space.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, so let's go back to jurisdictions. We mentioned a little bit here. With Boric's new approach there in Chile, do you see that impacting the supply coming from Chile going forward? I mean, it's not as scary as it sounded when we first saw these headlines about nationalization. It conjured up the worst, but it seems more like a public-private partnership kind of plan. Not as evil as first imagined, but it doesn't really sound good for a free market type person who would like to see the companies make the most that they can. What's your take on the impact of this, assuming, it goes through and it isn't undone by the next administration?
Yeah. Look, I think the word nationalization is incorrect, because from a practical point of view, lithium has been nationalized since the 80s in Chile. That's a reality, because lithium is a not concessible mineral, and the only way you are able to extract lithium, even if you have the concession, is that you get a license from the government, from the Ministry of Mining, which so far only one company has got, which is Codelco, the state-owned copper company. And the operation of Atacama is actually an operation where the mining property dates back prior to 1980, and therefore includes lithium. But all the rest of Chile is almost all the rest of Chile is basically new mining code, and therefore nobody owns the lithium, right? So this new policy, from that perspective, I think for development of new projects, it basically is not a good policy, and for that reason, nothing is going to happen with new projects in Chile, but which was not going to happen anyway. But on the other hand, I think in the case of Atacama, the announcements left the door open for a negotiation between Codelco and SQM especially, and also with Albemarle, but I think SQM is the possibility, where they might then allowed, or they're encouraged to negotiate some early entry of Codelco into the operation of Atacama. But that, for shareholders of SQM, would only be a good idea if for that SQM gets, for example, an extension of the contract beyond 2030. Remember, that expires in 2030. Or, and there's where probably we will see more value being generated, by increasing the extraction quota from now through 2030 and beyond. So SQM, which today is sitting at 240,000 tons maximum production capacity, might be able to go to 350. And I think that could be the main implications of this stated national lithium policy, which is very broad for the time being, and there's not much detail around it.
Right. Would it be fair to just summarize it as, under any foreseeable scenario, it's not going to increase Chile's likely production in a relevant time frame?
It might increase Atacama's production, but for all the rest, I think it's going to have a nil effect.
All right. Well, skipping over the border to Bolivia, Bolivia supposedly has the world's largest lithium reserves, if you want to call it that, but they have no production. Does Bolivia even matter? Is it foreseeable that Bolivia could actually become a significant player here? And does anybody want to invest in a place that periodically decides to actually nationalize mines?
I mean, that's my view. I would not put my money into an investment like that. Now, Bolivia is trying to do something. It has now 5 or 6 DLE companies testing their technologies. We haven't heard much in the last couple of months, so I would presume that there's not too good news, or they're not good news for the time being, which are coming out from there. And what you say is correct. This constant changes of policies and renationalizing what is already nationalized, and makes it very difficult for Bolivia to develop an industry, at least in a time frame of the next 8 to 10 years, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, even if that's a point I hadn't really thought about that. Even if everything were hunky-dory, if some super free market oriented administration came in and it didn't get kicked out the moment they started doing painful things, it would take years and years and years for Bolivia to start actually producing, assuming they could find the people, the choke point you meant. Yeah, no, that's okay.
It's also a technology challenge there. Uyuni is indeed it's a large resource, but it's a complex resource. It has lithium and levels which are lower than those of Atacama, and a lot of magnesium, and that makes it very complicated to extract the lithium efficiently.
So why this talk about a South American OPEC of lithium? I mean, is that just politics to look good on TV, or why would you even talk about that if you have no production capacity?
Who's talking about that? Mexico?
Bolivia proposed it, as I recall. There was an idea that the lithium producers of South America should get together OPEC style to.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is, if Mexico and Bolivia are talking about this and they don't produce a kilo.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, Mexico is a funny one too. We're going to nationalize lithium. We don't produce any, but we're nationalizing it. Yeah, I wondered if that was just politics. In a way, it's a great thing to nationalize because you don't actually take any mines away from anybody. So you can look good on TV without actually hurting any businesses.
Well, I don't know if you look good on TV. You might look also not so good.
Well, to your local supporters, perhaps. All right, so never mind the politics. You brought up the DLE. This is something my readers ask about a lot. Personally, I'm very skeptical about science projects as an investment thesis, and I want to see it, in commercial production for many years and show that it works. And before I get on board, but I get asked this a lot. Well, if this is going to revolutionize lithium, should we focus on lithium companies that are pushing DLE? And do you have a thought on that?
I mean, we have seen DLE companies pushing for these technologies for the last 15 years at least. And I think today there are probably, 30 companies promoting different technologies. All of them have broken the code and are ready to show the world that they have it. But none of them has so far, or on a large commercial extent. And here I want to tell you that DLE as a concept is fantastic. Huh? Imagine you take out the brine, you extract the lithium out of it at a much higher efficiency. Today, the conventional process, probably the efficiency is 60%. Here they're claiming 80, 90. And then you reinject all the rest into the salar, and again you have basically not reinjected exactly anything, just taking out the lithium units.
But you don't take the people's water away.
Exactly. So I mean, it sounds incredible, and the economic value of such a technology working is enormous. Do you have to think, for example, at Atacama, the main limitation of producing more lithium is not the more availability of lithium, is the net brine extraction. So the technology as such, let's now for a second imagine that with this technology, you only extract half of the water. You evaporate only half of the water. To maintain the net extraction, you could double the extraction of lithium and therefore double the production of lithium. So Atacama, instead of producing last year 200,000 tons, could have produced 400,000 tons. The amount of money that is so big that, of course, SQM and iLiMarkets have been for years, working and spending millions of dollars in trying out this technologies. And they have not implemented, not because they don't want to, it's because they're not mature enough to be implemented. So they sound a wonderful idea. I don't believe in any of them, but one of them is going to work. I don't know which.
Yeah, no, someday someone will show it. So
I don't know which.
This is the bottom line here is show me, don't tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, fair enough. Speaking of these companies, we have, as we're speaking, it's hot news, the merger, Livent, Alchem. Does that mean anything if you have these producers and another one producer? Does it change the production? I mean, maybe some economies of scale and some cost savings, but it doesn't change output. Do you see the M&A in the space heating up, and do you see it as being important or significant, or just something for investors to concern themselves with?
Well, look, I think the merger makes sense. I think that both companies have, first of all, they share a lot of operations geographically in Argentina. Both are in Canada, both in Argentina. Livent has a very good know-how in producing lithium out of brines. Alchem to a certain extent only, but on the other hand, the hard work experience is in Alchem in Australia, and they're developing 2 projects together in Canada where that know-how and experience is very much needed, because in Canada there isn't any know-how. So I think from that perspective, it's a very reasonable merger to promote, yeah, and I think they're going to, regardless of the savings, I think their mutual know-hows will be very complementary.
Oh, that's interesting. My Canadian friends will bristle at someone saying they don't have mining know-how in Canada, but of course,
we have lithium mining know-how. Lithium mining know-how. Sorry.
I understand. Well, that's interesting. It's good that you brought up Argentina too, because I meant to ask about that when we were talking jurisdictions. And it seems like a lot of the optimistic growth projections assume that all these Argentina projects are going to come online. At the same time, we have 100% inflation now in Argentina. The bank just raised the interest, central bank raised the interest rate to 97%. Again, I'm not going to ask you to be the political guru about what happens with Argentina next, but assuming the place doesn't blow up, which I'm not sure how safe an assumption is, but assuming it doesn't, do you see Argentina as it is, as being a reliable place for investment and development? And can it really help bring online all this lithium that the bulls are saying, or the people who are bullish on production say it will?
Yeah. Let me first start by making a disclaimer. I'm a board member of Galan Lithium, which is an Australian company with a project in Argentina. So take that into account into whatever I say here.
Appreciate the disclosure.
Yeah, I should have made it from the beginning. I forgot about. Apologies. Anyway, but if you ask me about Argentina, from a resource point of view, the resources in Argentina are clearly not comparable to Atacama. But still, there are resources which the cost of production of lithium carbonate is lower than any lithium carbonate produced out of minerals. Maybe with the exception of Greenbushes, maybe, but just there. So from that perspective, they are very efficient production sites. From a jurisdiction point of view, Argentina has, indeed, Argentina has a lot of economic troubles today, but mining is controlled by the provinces. So it's not federally controlled, it's provincially controlled. And the provinces where lithium is present in Argentina, Jujuy, Catamarca, and Salta, I mean, the disposition of authorities to support these projects is very big. Today we have, probably we'll see in the next years, 10 projects being going into production from now until the end of the decade. And this is the consequence of a very mining-friendly jurisdiction with authorities and environmental authorities which are trying to help, and they realize they need it. I mean, the same reason why they have problems is why they need more investment, they need to generate more projects. So what I've seen at the provincial level is a very strong support. And probably Argentina's main difficulty today is this currency exchange, the control systems they have, and yeah, whether this is going to last, how it's going to be solved, I think it will not be solved from one day to the other. We'll probably have to live with it for a couple of years. I would imagine and I hope that it is solved eventually. But when they tell me, is it worth to invest? Well, we have had in Argentina Livent operating for 25 years. And Livent has decided to go ahead with more investments and expand production in Argentina. We have Alchem with the former Orocobre operation, which not only did they decide to expand production, but they're also investing in a new project, Sal de Vida and Hombre Muerto. So at the end of the day, the experience of the operators in Argentina must be good, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing this, right? I mean, that's to me the most evident answer to this. Yes, it has difficulties, but when I compare it to other jurisdictions, I mean, you get permits, you can produce, you have low cost of production. Yeah, it works.
Speaking of other jurisdictions, and maybe technology question too, one of the things that came up is the Chinese and their lepidolite. That's not a mineral I'm familiar with, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, lepidolite. But I understand it's sort of dirty lithium. It's more expensive to process and get out, but yet apparently it's quite abundant. Do you see China coming in as a big swing player here, or not?
I mean, China has lithium resources. They have brines, they have some spodumene, and they have these lepidolites, which are lithium-bearing minerals, but which in average have a significantly lower lithium content. If we speak about spodumene in Australia or in Canada, usually we talk about lithium oxide concentrations of 1 to 1.4 Greenbushes, close to 2%. In the case of lepidolites, you have also a broad range. And in China, what is being exploited today goes from 0.2 to 0.8%. The 0.8%, they are not that expensive to operate, but 0.2, that's already becomes a lot more expensive. Right? So it's there where you have today the marginal cost producer. and the cost of production of those mines is very high, probably in the $30 level, and that, of course, depending on the prices, this will be the swing production. If prices move above $30, they will be producing. If they move below, like they did now for a couple of weeks, these operations stop operating immediately. So so that will be the swing production, the marginal cost of production in the industry. Whether or how much they can be scaled, I'm a little more skeptical about what is being said. China is talking on China. The talk is that probably that production could be as much as 400,000 tons of LCE. Other sources tell me no, that could not be more than 150, maybe 200. It's very gray, this area of what the supply is going to come out of China. But the uncertainty is probably, I don't know, 200,000 tons. That is more or less the difference between optimistic and more pessimistic or realistic scenarios. 200,000 tons is the growth of demand of 8 months. It doesn't really change too much the global scenario, really.
All right. I suppose it's not a fair question. I wonder about Rio Tinto's big project over in Serbia. It seems like that's never going to go anywhere. But maybe it's worth bringing out. I mean, I remember reading about the opposition saying the case was that lithium mining was the dirtiest kind of mining there is. And I found this rather gobsmacking. To say that lithium mining is somehow dirtier than something scary like uranium or something that actually is toxic. Was that just nonsense that the opposition made up because they were opposed, or is there something about lithium mining that there's any reasonable way you could claim that it is the dirtiest kind of mining in the world, or even a particularly dirty kind of mining?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nonsense. Okay.
I even hadn't heard that argument about dirty mining. Yeah, no, I mean it's actually quite a when I compared, you don't need any big reagents. I think it's the dense media separation, flotation, which are so standard things. Which
well, sure, for the brine, you're just evaporating water, so that's pretty benign. But I don't know about the spodumines and so on. I don't know what reagents are used in that. So
no, I mean it's really not that I'm aware of any. Actually, I've never heard. I mean, what is always claimed about mineral production of lithium is that the CO2 footprint is high. Of course, it's higher than that of producing lithium out of brines where you evaporate concentrate through solar energy. But what's one story with CO2 emission. But from there to say that it is a dirty mining, I personally have never heard that.
All right, well, I thought it was nonsense, but I figured if there was any basis for reality, someone like you would know. Okay, well then, you've been very generous with your time. So the big question, I think, excuse me, most of the audience would like to know now is the pain done? Is the big correction in lithium that we've seen this year, which pretty much wiped out all of last year's gains, is it over? Will it go lower? Do you have a sense for that? This is kind of economic crystal ball question, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, the reasons why lithium went down now during the first quarter of this year, and it started actually in November. I think they're well understood. It has to do with battery inventories having built up, and then incremental supply coming out of China, and the seasonality, which has been very traditional. This lower purchasing of lithium during the first quarter, which has to do with Chinese New Year, which had to do with EV sales, which slowed down usually in Q1 compared with the previous Q4 because of the decline of subsidies with the new year coming. So that has been, that part was all expected. In China, a big narrative about lithium prices going down. So everybody immediately, that's like a self-fulfilled prophecy. Oh, prices are going to come down, so I don't buy lithium because then I deplete my inventory. And now it's moving the other way around. And yeah, the industry will need to rebuild its inventories. Again, our view is that we will end the year with on lithium levels significantly above marginal cost of production, which we have said is $30. So that price at the end of the year could easily be $40, $50. And actually we're telling our clients when we have to nail down a number, we say $50. But
all right, well, let me rephrase the question a little bit. If you were someone looking at the lithium market and you had a shopping list of lithium companies you're interested in buying but hadn't yet, let's say you missed last year, you noticed it, and now the price is corrected. If you were such a person, I'm not asking you to make individual investment advice here, but just in general, if somebody has been on the sidelines and they're thinking about the lithium market, would now be a good time to start executing on that shopping list, or would you wait to see how the recession impacts the lithium price in the months ahead, or how do you see that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good time. The correction, I mean, the downward correction has still not corrected upwards, and I think as we go on over the coming years, we will see an increasing shortage of lithium, and we will see probably consistently high prices or prices significantly above marginal cost of production. And that, with that analysis or with those numbers, any evaluation you make today of companies, you would probably think they're undervalued. Most of them.
So your key takeaway really is, never mind what happens in the near term, this is such a solid case in the years going forward. If you buy the right companies, the good companies, and you have a longer time frame, you should come out ahead. Is that your view?
Yeah. The question is, what are the good companies?
Well, of course. That's the due diligence question. Yes.
And I would tell you, I mean, to me, the good companies, it doesn't come down to resource anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't how good a resource is or not, how much better it is than the other. Because prices will be so much above the cost of production of these resources that what really matters is, will they be producing and how much and when? And in order to assess that, you need to look at the team, at the technical team. Don't look at the directors. Look at,
which goes back to your first point about people being the choke point. That's very interesting.
That is, to me, the bottleneck in this industry today. Know-how. And if you summarize it, where the know-how is, brines, the know-how today still is very much in Chile, simply because Chile was so much the only place where really lithium was produced massively, right? From brines. The know-how in mineral mining, in concentration, is in Australia. China is also developing now very quickly, and China has also been able to get very good yields out of their low-grade mining. And then the refining of minerals, of mineral concentrates, that know-how is in China. And it's just as simple as to look at how difficult it has been for TNT and Albemarle in Australia. Both companies having operations in China, doing exactly the same they're trying to replicate in Australia. And they're, what, 2 or 3 years late with their projects? And these are companies which know how to produce. So whenever I see companies which have never produced and say, we're going to get it in the first try, and we're going to produce a lot of it immediately. Okay.
No, I get it. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's funny to me in the, you know, I'm not just a gold bug, but it's a big part of my business, and it's a lot of what my audience loves. And so when somebody from some other walk of life comes up and says something is a great idea, they say, oh, it'll be a gold mine. And I think, oh, that's terrible, because it's so difficult. You've just told me that this is going to be full of problems and unexpected difficulties, and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and the thing is, and I don't blame you. I mean, you don't know that you don't know until you fail.
Very good. This has all been very useful, Daniel. I'd like to give you the last word. You've been generous with your time. Is there anything else that you want to make sure the audience knows?
Look, no, I'm simply I'm optimistic on this industry from a lithium producer's point of view. I think we have still good years ahead, but it's not going to be forever. That's also important to understand, and therefore speed of execution is very important. When I look at assets, what are the worst worth? Which are those which are more worth? It's those who can produce quickly. And I say it's not going to last forever, because we should never forget that lithium is going to be recycled.
Well, and
And
it's not
also,
rare in the first place.
it's not rare, but it's going to be recycled. So so mined lithium in 8-10 years from now will not be so desperately needed like it is needed today or the next 8 years.
I get it. The mine supply is more urgent during the build out, but once you're there, then it becomes a marginal supplement.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why speed of execution is important. The team is important. Don't look too much. Jurisdiction is important. Permitting. If the resource is extraordinarily good or so, well, that's the second layer you need to look at. It's these things which can help you to speed up a project, which will give you more value.
I love it. I love it. When people say great is king, I always think that oversimplifies, but so I very much appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been very enlightening, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Lobo.
Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.